Hello everyone, it's Michelle Lupton here and welcome to the last edition of Case Me a Christmas Card for 2021. I'm going to be showing you how I made this card, and my guest today is Linda Trace, who is a crafty friend here in Australia. So I'm starting with this stencil from Picket Fence Studios. This was a recent release from Picket Fence. And I'm adhering it to a piece of cardstock. It's sort of a mid-blue colour, one of my favourite colours of blue. And I wanted to add some pale colour to the blue cardstock. So I pulled out my Tumbled Glass Distress Oxide ink and life-changing blender brush and started adding some of that. But I actually eventually changed my mind and decided I wanted the ink blended colour to be a little bit brighter than the Tumbled Glass. So I'm just adding this because I thought if I add a paler colour down the bottom, I can sort of fade it out towards the top. So now I've got out some white pigment ink. So this is Hues Unicorn White pigment ink. And just rubbing over the stencil to get rid of some of the tumbled glass from off the stencil so I don't sort of contaminate my blending brush. And now I'm going over it with the white pigment ink just to brighten up the bottom left-hand corner. I'm not actually going to go right over the top part of the ink blending that I did with the pale blue, so it will actually fade out a little bit towards the top. And you can see I'm using my ink stands to help me keep my ink pads still while I'm doing my ink blending. All right, so here is the card that I am casing today from Linda. Now, I honestly do not know what technique Linda used for this, but what I did see is that she used a stencil, I think, and she's got white outlines around these little drops on her pattern, and she's coloured in the drops so they've got a bit of a gradient happening, and she's got some sparkle on them. So I went with that idea, and I'm going to modify it slightly because I am not going to have the white lines all the way around the shapes. You might have noticed on her card, she drew a white line around her patterned panel, and just in one place she had 3 little dots. So I thought I might actually add some dots around each of my shapes that I colour in, so each of these flowers. But I'm starting off with a mid-blue pencil, so I'm using Derwent pencils today. And I'm just concentrating at the moment on the larger of those flowers on my panel. And I started with the mid-colour blue, and now I'm going to a more aquamarine blue, more of a Michelle blue really, into the centre of those flowers. Now, once I had those done, I decided that for the smaller flowers in between, I wanted to brighten them up a little bit more, but just towards the centre of the flowers. So I just added these little V-shaped sort of scribbles towards the centre of each of those flowers to just, brighten up the middle bits. So I'm not going to bore you with all of the colouring in because it was fairly repetitive. But now I'm adding my stencil back on to help me add my outlines. So I'm grabbing a white gel pen, actually just pushing down my stencil to make sure it doesn't move to start with. And here's my white Jelly Roll gel pen. And what I'm doing is I'm just putting lines, just making sure my gel pen's actually working. Putting lines towards the centre of the larger flowers to start with so that they sort of radiate out from the centre, but they don't reach the edge of each of the petals. And then I went in with a gel pen again and just added up added in some dots to sort of fill in the missing spaces that I didn't actually add those white lines. So to bring in that sort of dot pattern that was on Linda's card. All right, so I finished off that and I decided I wanted a little bit more detail in here. So again, I'm going into the center of the smaller flowers and just adding a few little brightening up lines in the center of those smaller flowers. All right, now because I am actually going to do some embossing over the top of this, I decided to heat set it because I wasn't quite sure how long it would take for that white gel pen to dry. And now I've pulled out a stamp set that's also from Picket Fence Studios. So both the stencil and the stamp that I'm using today are from Picket Fence Studios. Sorry, my head is right in the way there because I'm just trying to make sure that my sentiment is nice and straight on this panel. Now, just to make sure that I didn't get any stray embossing powder where I don't want it, I'm using a liberal amount of anti-static powder here. And I'm going to grab out my Versamark ink and ink up this stamp that says Joyeux Noel, so French for joyous Christmas. And I'm making sure that my stamp is really well inked here and stamping it down, and just to make doubly sure, I'm going to stamp it again. All right, so that's all done. Now I'm going to just grab a piece of scrap paper and use that to catch my embossing powder. So this is white embossing powder from Hero Arts, which is my favourite. It's a nice bright white. And getting out my heat tool again and making sure that is nice and melted. All right, now I found at this point that just on the left-hand side of the sentiment, because I had white gel pen and the sort of twirly bits on the letters overlapping, I wanted there to be a little bit more definition to the sentiment. So I pulled out a Copic marker in a mid blue and just basically drew in a drop shadow. And then I decided that when it actually dried into the cardstock, it wasn't dark enough. So I grabbed a darker mid blue and just went over it again. So you can see I'm just going on the right-hand side of each of those letters to create a bit of a drop shadow, and that gives a little bit more definition to that sentiment. Now, the panel that I was working on was actually the same size as a card base for me, but I decided I wanted a white border. I always like to have a white border if possible. So I'm just cutting down this panel and I'm going to adhere that straight onto a top folding white note card that I've made from Neenah Solar White cardstock. So I'm just using my tape runner here and sticking that on. And at this point I could have been done, but I remembered that on Linda's card, she actually had quite a bit of glitter and sparkle to her card. So I pulled out my Jelly Roll glitter pen here and added plenty of sparkle to the center of all of those flowers. And that is my card for today. So thank you very much for watching. Thank you very much for Linda for being my guest today. And thank you to everybody who's been following along with my series for Case Me a Christmas Card this year. I hope to bring it back again next year. And hopefully I'll be able to make a few more videos between now and then. But thank you very much for your support for this series. I've had an absolute ball doing it. I wish everybody a very Merry Christmas and a very safe and happy New Year. Bye.